Welcome to the Surviving Layoffs community conversation. This is a place where we're gathering resources and subject matter experts and people with extensive experience to encourage, equip, and educate you so you can better handle change, seasons of change and challenge and opportunity. And this is all as a result of the upcoming book, the book that I have out, Surviving Layoffs. But I'm excited today to welcome Pat Daniels to our community conversation. And I'm excited because Pat is an HR manager. So she's an HR professional. She started her career in the IT space at AT&T. She was an application development manager, actually has her master's in project management, but then she segued into the HR area. And for the last 10, 15 years, Pat has been an HR manager. So with that, I'd like to welcome Pat in. And Pat, share with us, what are you doing specifically in HR?
Well, right now, thanks, Boris. Right now, I'm an HR manager focusing on skills management for DXC technology. And what that involves is a couple of things: working on the ongoing development and release management of our skills taxonomy, which is basically a repository of all of our skills, and doing strategic planning with our business partners to understand what skills our people have, what skills we need, where we have opportunity to cross-skill, upskill, that kind of thing. And I heavily support the communication aspects of skills management, as well as any training and support for the employee base so that they know how to use our skills management tool, our taxonomy, and how to maintain their skills profile. So those are the main components of what I'm currently supporting. But for today's session with you, I'm hoping I can contribute by giving three different perspectives. One is, as an HR professional, when I was a generalist, before I started doing more project management and skills management, I was an HR generalist, and I had the role of working with managers and employees when there were reductions in force. So I was involved in those conversations and had to coach people through that, as well as I've been the spouse of someone who has been terminated periodically. So I understand the impact that it has on a spouse. And then as a potential person that has seen the company evolve over multiple years and having to go through multiple seasons of downsizing, you never know when you yourself might be at risk. And so there's that also perspective that I'd like to share today.
Wow. So I guess I would like to start the conversation with, you have been on the layoff side of the table. You've been there with the manager having that conversation with someone. So let's start from there. I mean, what is that like? How have you participated? Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Well, typically, we want to make sure that the manager is clear from an HR perspective of how to conduct the conversation. And what's most critical is that there be the respect of the employee, that they communicate clearly what, if any, issues there were perhaps with their performance, and that they share with the employee any opportunities that they can to explain where they can improve, where their strengths are, and all of those types of things. It shouldn't just be a negative message, if you will. Like, I know the main message is, we're sorry, we have to let you go. But there's some things that they can also share with the employee about their performance, about their areas of strength and their areas of opportunity for development that could be really helpful for the employee as they conclude this chapter with that particular company. So it's important for the manager to have that perspective and to offer that kind of support for the employee.
And how have you seen the managers do that? Has that been challenging for them, easy for them? I know in one of my situations, I had a very close relationship with my manager, and the manager's like, Boris, I'm sorry, there was nothing I could do. It's beyond my control. What's the experience that you see with managers having that challenging conversation?
Well, managers need to take responsibility for being the voice of the company. They can't say, well, It wasn't like, was it, they have to still act as a leader, and
Sure.
they need to take responsibility for that. But even with that said, that doesn't mean that they can't um, offer support and offer some perspective. And it isn't the end of the world. I have seen some managers conduct the conversation where it's just, this is it, and it's very cut and dry, very almost negative, I guess, only. Whereas there is an opportunity to not make it just so negative, and to really show what might be just some compassion, because you've been working with this person for a
Sure.
long time, and certainly they have feelings, and it's a difficult conversation. And so it's important for the manager to have that perspective and to realize that there's nothing to say they might be sitting on the other end of the table sometime soon.
So as the HR manager there now, how are you communicating, supporting, helping the employee who is now in the position of, that job no longer exists?
Well, during the conversation as an HR rep, I don't really have much to say unless they have questions for me. Typically, I basically am there to support them if, they have questions. But typically after the conversation, if an employee needs any kind of support whatsoever about exit processing or anything like that, they can certainly come. But the message that I like to have offline with the employee is that there's a couple of things. Number one, this is pretty much the way things are happening right now in our world, and it's not just unique to our organization, and that they need to um, understand that and look at this not just as the end of something, but as I mentioned earlier, it's a change, and it's a turn in the road, and that they need to keep as much as possible a positive perspective and realize that there's opportunity for growth, and to maintain a positive perspective. I can't emphasize that enough. Um, and so when I was saying before about what the manager should do, the employee needs to be really proactive in that conversation with their manager, and understand what is that the manager can suggest to them that they can leverage and take forward with them in terms of performance feedback, or what the manager has seen as their particular strengths, because all of that is valuable information that they can then now leverage as they begin to plan what they want to do next and what skills they'll need to do whatever that is. So having that conversation, it needs to be a two-way exchange, not just receiving the message, but asking questions as well.
And I guess one of the things that I think we all are aware of now, that change in careers and jobs happens more frequently in this day and age. I can just remember with our parents, right? Everybody got to a job and just stayed there. Change was rare, but I think today it's more common to see change, whether it's by your own choice or it is forced upon you. I guess, would that be a correct statement?
Oh, absolutely. Especially from a skills perspective, let me share this. The name of the game right now is, do you have what an organization needs
Okay.
when they need it? And that changes over time. So they might be looking for, say, Java programmers one day, or one season, if you will. And then next, the focus might be on something different. So the question is, what is in demand by the organization? What do they need to satisfy the needs of the client that the company supports? And do you have that? Do you have those skills that are in demand? And if not, what is your career path, and what is your vision for getting trained in those skills so that you can stay gainfully employed? So it's all a matter of having the right skills at the right time when they're needed.
And one of the things that I actually communicate in my book is that it is your responsibility to manage your career. And if you're
Absolutely.
constantly growing, You're constantly learning. You're trying to get assessment of what's going on in the marketplace. The goal is to be marketable inside your current company and then outside your company, so that
Right.
you expect these seasons of change. And it makes it a little bit easier. It's still challenging for someone to say, hey, you're gone. Your job is no longer there. You have to leave, get out. They may have said it nicely, but in the back of your mind, those thoughts and emotions, get out. And I guess that segues to our next kind of perspective, is that you've been on the other side of the table, the spouse, right? And your husband being in a position where you say, hey, honey, the job isn't there. We've been laid off. They told me get out. Share a little bit from that perspective.
Well, before I do, let me just go back to something you just said, because you hit it right on the head when you said a person owns their career.
Sure.
They own their development. The company's not going to oversee that for you. You have to be in tune with your own skill set, your own proficiency in those skills, and know what is out there and what's in demand, and make sure you're linked up accordingly with that. Because no one else is going to do that for you, and it's no one else's responsibility. Now, to go back to your other comment, the best thing I can say there is that it's very, very difficult for a person to receive that message that they're being let go. There's no doubt about that. But it's equally as difficult for that same person to then have to deliver that message home.
Ooh, yes.
No one wants to come home and tell their spouse, especially if they're a single family income,
Right.
that I'm out of work. And so a couple of things have to happen here. The person that received the news has to understand that they're not alone.
Sure.
Other people have had this experience, but they're not alone in terms of the impact. It's going to impact your spouse and your family potentially as well. But let's just focus on the spouse. And what that means is that even though you're hurting, they're going to be hurting too. And so you have to kind of have a mentality, what I call it is we're in it together mentality, which says this is not a good thing. And yes, neither one of us like it. And yes, it's painful, but we will get through this, and it will not impact the relationship. I think if you don't make a conscious decision to recognize the onslaught of emotions that both of you will be going through, it has the potential to take its toll in ways you don't want it to.
Sure.
So it means mutually supporting each other through what is a challenging time.
That is great, because the one who receives that news, I come back and I'm setting the tone in my household, right? How will I respond to my spouse? How will I respond to my children? Will I let it get me edgy? Will I let it push me towards negative actions, whether it be, mentally negative, my physical health, or like you said, to relationships. So that is a great piece of information there, to just be aware of that. I guess so, you being the spouse on that side during that time, are you being extra mindful with how you communicate, the support you give, or, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think you have to put yourself in the other person's position as much as possible, so you can hopefully be as understanding and patient as possible, because although you're both basically going through this challenge together, they're the one feeling the greatest impact. But everybody is adjusting to the new normal, even if it is temporary, at a different pace. And the one who was the directly impacted person needs the most support. But I don't want to minimize the support that both spouses need. I think it's still both. But yeah, you do have to put on a different hat once someone has come home with that news. And you have to realize that now their needs have changed. And they may need a little bit more space. They may need a little bit more support. You may have to help them update their resume. You may have to be called on to do some things you didn't think you would have to do before, but it's all part of being in it together. I'll just go back to that, being in it together.
And you know your spouse, right? You should. We know each other. We have strengths and weaknesses. And if that's a place where I am weak, maybe, hey, I may need you to just, motivate me, give me a little push, or like you said, is it give some room? So that's where you say, hey, I know my spouse, I know our strengths and weaknesses, and this is how we work well together.
Yeah, and I think, the key word there is encouragement. But like you said, you also have to know your spouse. We'll talk about this a little bit later in terms of not letting the person get stuck. They're going to be on a little bit of an emotional roller coaster, but guess what? They can't stay there. They have to be able to realize, okay, we're going to get through this and move forward.
And that gets us back to, hey, you need a plan, right? Somewhere in receiving this news, accepting this news, you need a plan. I guess let's segue to, you said now, hey, you are the person who could potentially be experiencing this change. Speak a little bit from that side of the table.
Yeah, no one likes to think about the possibility of losing their job, and if you've been in any companies where they go through what we call waves of downsizing, you kind of like wipe your brow after you find out that you're still employed after the first wave, and then another quarter goes and there's another wave and you see more of your friends leave or whatever, and you're just wondering when the floor is going to open up for you, so to speak. And so it's important, number one, to understand, I think, when you're in a company that's going through that type of transitioning and re-engineering or whatever you want to call it, that, I think you have to face reality, number one, that you could be in the next batch, let's say. And so, as difficult as thinking about that happening is, it's important to embrace that as a possible reality and to prepare for it. And to realize that if it happens, it's not the end of the world, because that is not the only company in the world. And it may be the one that you've been with for 20, 30 years, but change happens. And when it does, the job may have died, but you haven't. You have to continue on and realize that there's something more still out there. So instead of looking at it, and I've said this before, instead of looking at it as an end, look at it as a new beginning. Maybe a little fuzzy, you may not have a clear vision of what is next, but there is something still out there, something new, some new opportunity, and it is a turn in the road, not an end in the road. And that change is really constant in our world, and change needs to be perceived as something good, and it will force you to grow in ways you've never perhaps wanted to grow before. But they are ways that you will be growing that will make you better on the other side of the thing than you are currently, because you will be stretched to do things maybe you've never done before, learn things you've never learned before, and to evolve into a new and better you, basically, as a result of the experience. So even though it appears very negative and discouraging in the beginning, it really is a great opportunity to evolve into a much better professional ultimately.
And the underlying theme of this conversation here is growth, right?
Yes,
Continually development. And I didn't even see that at the beginning. And you are focused on skills and learning and development. So that's a great theme here.
As you can see from the footnote there, this chart is from Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who included in her On Death and Dying. Well, you might say, well, what does that have to do with this topic? Well, anytime there's a significant change, one that's very impacting, it could be the death of something. It could be literally the death of a person. It could be the death of a job, which is kind of what we're talking about here. It could also be the death of a relationship. But what it means basically is that something has happened in your life that you didn't expect, that has an initial negative impact to you, and you have to go through this adjustment process to accept the reality of the situation in order to move forward into a more positive and progressive development of yourself. So if you look at the positive and negative on the left side there, it shows you at the beginning where the impact occurred. You were at the status quo state, and then something happens. That's where you lose your job, and you immediately take a nosedive and you're in shock and denial. Then you go to the second state, which is disruption, which means life isn't like you thought it was going to be anymore. And you're quite challenged by understanding what your new normal is. And you may experience anger and fear. And then after staying there a while, then you get to the third state, which is exploration. That's when you realize, you know, I guess this is how it's going to be. I've got to move forward. It's all about, again, perpetual growth, perpetual development, looking forward. What was is over. You can't stay where you are. You have to develop, as you mentioned, a plan. What do I want to do next? What do I have that people need? What do I need to do to get the skills I need to do what I want to do? And so these are all of the things you have to challenge yourself with, and that's all part of exploration. It's how do I get from where I am to where I want to go? What am I good at? What experiences and skills do I have that I can leverage for what I want to do next? How do I prepare to move from point A to point B? And then this fourth state called rebuilding is where you basically, in the reaction you see, it's a commitment. You make a commitment to yourself to do something, to have a plan, to move forward. Elizabeth Elliot, who's one of the women I admire most in the world, she's passed now, but she used to say, do the next thing, which means come up with a plan and do the next thing. And one of the key words that people are using right now is reinvent yourself. Why do you need to reinvent yourself? Well, because what you used to do and what you had before is now over, and it's time to move on. So it's a new day, there's new opportunities that await you, and you need to figure out, again, how to get from point A to point B. So you might say, well, how do I do that? One of the ways you do is you start thinking outside of the box. You might have been in a job for God knows how many years, maybe even decades, and now your world has kind of come to a screeching halt. Okay, so what else can you do? What else can you leverage? What else do you enjoy? Some people make drastic career changes when sometimes these types of things happen in their life. They make major career shifts. Think about what you want to do and don't stay in your comfort zone. Maybe try something new. Again, stay teachable. Figure out what it is you want and what it is you need, and then go get the training that you need to do it. And don't ever neglect your network. Make sure you're maintaining your network of professionals that you socialize with, whether it's from 10 years ago or just from last week. These are people that can help you, can coach you and encourage you, and give you insight into opportunities that are out there. And when you need help, whether it's looking for a job or just navigating the emotions that are part of this change curve, get the help that you need. There's no shame in getting help, because it's a difficult time and you want to get through it, and you want to find that right balance where you can be successful again, and be patient with yourself, because it does take time. But you have to believe that in time and with your plan, you will be able to rebuild and find the new thing that is out there. And when you find it, you'll be a better you as well.
And I'm just enjoying that we're taking something that for so many people can be a really great negative, right? And we're saying, hey, it's an opportunity. There's an opportunity there. There's something new that can be born out of this, right? We're focusing on this as a change instead of loss. And the loss is real. I mean, we have some upcoming guests, so we're gonna have some therapists on here. Again, resources, subject matter experts, really to help you deal with change and loss, because it can be challenging for people to go through these stages and come out, better, improved, reinvented, rebuilt on the end. Well, Pat, I thank you for having this conversation with our community. I know it's beneficial for me. I'm sure it's beneficial for a lot of people. Surviving Layoff community, thank you for participating in our conversation. Welcome your feedback, everybody, recommendations.
Hi, I'm